The funeral of Chinese General Xu Qiliang on June 8th not only laid to rest a vice-chairman of the country's Central Military Command who helped consolidate Xi Jinping's power over the military, it also signalled another CMC vice-chairman had been purged. Among the Politburo member wreaths on display at the ceremony, her Weidong's was conspicuously absent, nor did her attend in person. Her Weidong oversaw China's military operations around Taiwan as head of the PLA's Eastern Command and orchestrated the large-scale drills following former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit. He has not been seen in public since the National People's Congress on March 11. While he is one of more than 70 PLA generals purged since Xi took power, his position as vice chairman marks the most senior purging of a CMC member since China's Cultural Revolution. Is Xi Jinping simply strengthening the military's combat readiness, or are there other motives at play? Could the latest purges of those closest to and fast-tracked by Xi suggest the erosion of his power in a factional war, as some CCP scholars say? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yin Khvat. Joining us today are Chen Fangyu, Soochow University Political Science Assistant Professor, and John Eastwood, Eiger Law Senior Partner. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
Over the past 2 years, China has conducted 2 rounds of purges within the PLA. The first wave targeted the PLA rocket force, responsible for China's strategic missile arsenal. Then in June 2024, former Defense Minister General Wei Fenghe and then Defense Minister General Li Shangfu were both expelled from the party for violating, quote, political discipline. The second wave of investigations began in November 2024, involving CMC Director of Political Work Department and Political SAR, Admiral Miao Hua, followed by current Vice Chairman General He Weidong, the second in command of the PLA. There was also PLA Eastern Theatre Commander Lin Xiangyang. Both Lin and He were loyal to Xi. Of the 7 CMC members announced at the 20th National Congress in 2022, in which Xi stacked top positions with his loyalists, only 4 now remain, including Xi Jinping himself. John, let me come to you first. So tell us, how do, the purging of He Weidong and Miao Hua contribute to, the worry that people have, either over Xi's political judgments or perhaps even attempts to undermine Xi?
I mean, you get down to it. I mean, you can't go around the Chinese military, their equivalent of the Pentagon, the Bai Dalo. You can't throw a potato in that hallway without hitting somebody that's corrupt. And, so many years, so many decades, everybody in China has gotten ahead through essentially relationshipology. It's almost like a scientific skill of building and sucking up to people and giving them gifts and doing favors for them and connecting in. So you have He Weidong and you have Miao Hua, and those guys are part of this whole Fujian clique, this group of people that know Xi from way back when. Their rise is very much tied in with their relationship.
And could you also argue, John, that they helped Xi Jinping rise?
Yes. Yes. So building up this big base of people, you have like 2 big pillars for his support, which would be this kind of the Shanxi gang, and you have the Fujian clique. And right now it seems like an awful lot of the people that are being wiped out are coming from the Fujian clique. But the other key part is they have these retainers. They have all these people around them, these people whose salaries and have got to rise. They've got mansions. They've got to be gifted. They've got all sorts of titles and other things, cars, and trying to keep up with that many people, who owe you and you owe them, is really hard. And so what you end up doing, there's always a second wave where you start wiping out all the people that supported you down to a more manageable number.
Right. Professor Chen, what could be, if we took a step back, what could be, though, all the reasons behind why these 2 men, these 2 officers, were purged?
Well, we don't have much open or public information about the stories behind this, but we do know that there's a very amazing big scale of the purge, especially the numbers in the past decades. And only just take the 2024, for example, there are more than 40 provincial or ministerial purges of the high-level military officials. So there is a lot of things going on there. But in general, we see in the studies of the authoritarian regime, we do know that every dictator has to do this. So there is a famous book, A Dictator's Handbook, by Bruno Mesquita and Smith and other colleagues, saying that the best way of consolidation of power is to keep their winning coalition as small as possible. Just as John mentions that they have to, consolidate the power to a small number of people so that you can become more effectively control them and to reward them with your resources. So I think that is the basic story of every dictator.
Okay,
yeah.
So John, and both of you actually are saying that these purges, that Xi was behind them. I mean, do you understand the people who think that perhaps somebody else was behind it by the fact that, these were his protégés fast-tracked, they'd only just gone through, being checked for their political loyalty, their loyalty to Xi?
I can't imagine anything like that ever happening in a mature country with a large military. The United States, Britain, France, even Russia, it would be horrendously embarrassing to have that. So I can't imagine that that Xi ever really wanted to get here. But there may be a bit of gamesmanship between the people from within his circle. The second part of this, of course, is this question about whether there's a resurgent group of other factions, because traditionally China had, you had like the Zhang group, you had the Hu Jintao group, Zhang by meaning Jiang Zemin, you have Hu Jintao's group, and then you had Xi. And they're all like sharing power. And Jiang Zemin did his bit and stepped down. Hu Jintao did his bit, stepped down. Xi Jinping gets in and doesn't want to give up the keys. And I think there's a bit of burning resentment. People see the museums being changed over to reflect Xi Jinping thought, and it burns at them because they're thinking, wasn't it supposed to be my turn? Why?
Right. So we'll come to this later, though, in terms of who else might be behind the purges. So 1 year ago, after purging former Defense Minister General Wei Fenghe and then Defense Minister General Li Shangfu, Xi personally decided to convene a CMC political work conference at the historic revolutionary base at Yan'an in Shanxi province. In front of the entire military top brass, Xi referred to political war as the lifeline of the PLA, emphasized the military must be led by those, quote, loyal to the party, and demanded that senior officers, quote, introspect, engage in soul-searching reflections, and make earnest rectifications. As Xi has said before, echoing Mao Zedong, the barrels of guns must always be in the hands of those who are loyal and dependable to the party. Xi has increasingly called for China's top national security officials to be ready for war. Professor Chen, so in your assessment, could a campaign that started out with pure corruption, that was one of the reasons that Miao Hua and her Weidong could be purged, it could have been related to corruption. Has it turned into something different? And why does Xi need to demand loyalty from the PLA? Could it suggest perhaps not enough of an appetite in the PLA to move on Taiwan?
Well, it's a complicated question here because in the dictatorship, I think everybody is corrupted, more or less. so because it's not a political system like in democracies. There's no monitors. There's no freedom of speech that the press can maybe monitor what is going on, and there's no system and there's no mechanisms of to prevent corruption. So maybe one of the purpose is to decrease the levels of the corrupt. Yeah, that is true. However, because everyone is becoming in this nested network, so it's highly impossible to just clean out everything. I think he still has the target of Taiwan and the goal of making China as a strong military power. But there are more obstacles waiting for him.
John, on that topic, though, Xi's intended goal to take Taiwan, but does mistrusting his own military, does that have an impact on taking Taiwan? Does it reduce the appetite for risk?
I mean, yeah, that leads into a really interesting thing. I mean, you have, if you have people around you that you can absolutely trust, okay, from a political standpoint, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually trust them from a military standpoint. So if they're yes men, and I know, like, for example, right now, that can be a problem. If people say, you know, let's do it. Of course we're ready. Of course we can invade tomorrow. That doesn't help you. You can get into a disastrous war. Even a democracy. The United States went through a terrible experience in Vietnam and with 20 years in Afghanistan, and they don't even have a yes men culture in their military. But if you have people that push you to do something you shouldn't do, that's bad. If you have a group that you can't trust, then the idea is that you might get into something and then you get undermined as you try to get into it. He might get told bad advice from people who want to see him fall.
So it would seem that Xi actually can't win. I mean, this is where the paranoia of dictators comes in.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, you see a lot of this happening. I mean, there's a whole range of these things. And if you look at, like, for example, the downfall of Qin, the foreign minister, this whole idea that foreign intelligence agencies had set him up with this girlfriend that he had a relationship with. And of course, now they've both disappeared. And I think there's a lot of other ousters that happened right within that time frame that indicate that he's not feeling secure. And if you look at the ouster of the yanking of Hu Jintao from the party meeting in October 2022, I mean, usually if you're trying to do a power move, if you want to look like a big man, you don't do things like that. You don't humiliate your political colleagues, even if they're on the other side. You look gracious. You do big man things or big person things. You're bigger than that. But being really petty and small and mean, on television in front of so many people, millions of people saw that.
Professor Chen, just going back to the Eastern Theater Command, this is obviously where He Weidong was from. He was the commander for 3 years, up until 2022. There was also a recent removal of Lieutenant General Tang Yong, who served in the 1990s to the 2000s. So he has this tremendous knowledge, I guess, of Taiwan operations. What effect do you think the purging of this expertise from that command has on the morale?
Well, I don't understand about how they work or their morale, but I think that does hurt the proficiency of this Eastern Command. And because these people are maybe very familiar with the Taiwan issues. But after the purge, then just as John mentions that there will be more yes men there. So people do not dare to do something that Xi Jinping does not like, or people does not want to say something true. They just want to say something that Xi Jinping likes.
Yeah. They just want to keep their job and their lives.
Yeah, so it's more likely that there will be more suspicious and cautious of these newly appointed leaders, and also there is higher probability of miscalculation of Xi Jinping and other members in Politburo.
Right. Yeah. Now, China has remained silent about whether it held a monthly Politburo meeting in May, required under its constitution. Meetings are usually recorded and released for public consumption. However, earlier this month, so-called leaked speeches surfaced from a supposed secret meeting held in the first half of May. Now, these reports said they came from former General Secretary Hu Jintao's factions, and at the meeting that Xi was berated for moving away from Deng Xiaoping's opening up, as well as for his ultra-consolidation of power and the rise of Xi's cult of personality. It is not possible, however, to verify the authenticity of the leaks. However, despite a period of absence in public, on June 4th, Xi met publicly with Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, but the meeting appeared to take place in Xi's personal residence in Zhongnanhai rather than at an official state venue. In early 2025, the PLA daily championed the virtues of, quote, collective leadership, which could be interpreted as a rebuke against Xi's insistence that all decisions should, quote, rely on a single voice of authority. John, let me ask you, first of all, let's deal with the missed Politburo meeting. How significant is this, and how about the location for the Lukashenko meeting?
Yeah, I mean, that is really weird. It's bizarre behavior, and I think it's a sign of something wrong going behind the scenes. And aside from which, it must have been very awkward for them to try to schedule a meeting for June 4th, given that that date apparently is not on their calendars. But everything about the trip was weird. I mean, they said, the meeting is going to be a family meeting. That's why we're meeting at the house. We're meeting back at the house because it's a family meeting. We're not going to go to the Great Hall of the People. But there's no family there. There was no wives there. I mean, it's always been a tradition for them to get American presidents and their spouses and of course, Xi Jinping and his spouse to have pictures together and to try to show that it's all a friendly meeting. Well, they didn't do that. There was no prior notice about the visit. There was no media present. I mean, normally they trumpet this stuff, which gives a sign that the meeting probably involved trouble.
Okay, hold that thought. Professor Chen, John has mentioned Hu Jintao's removal against his will. It was on TV, everybody saw it, from Congress. It was actually 20th Party Congress in October 2022. So those who believe that all of this are signs of Xi Jinping losing power say that this struggle began at that National Party Congress. It was, to give him the third term. Hu Jintao was removed against his will. There was also the disaffection caused by the death of Li Keqiang. What's your assessment of this and the rumors of perhaps coups against Xi, even within the military?
I don't think that Xi Jinping is losing control. On the opposite, he is controlling everything. And he is under a high pressure, and he is highly suspicious of everything, every leaders, his political colleagues, the former leaders, and he's just highly suspicious of everything. So part of the reason behind the purge. So right now he has to consolidate the power because after the death of Li Keqiang, and he is the one. He is the one. There's no counterpart of it. So when he and Li Keqiang both serving in the top leaders, then maybe something, when economy goes wrong, then people can blame Li Keqiang, not only on Xi Jinping. So I think the purge and also some of the reshuffle of these leaderships is, to consolidate power. And he is still controlling everything.
John, what's your view on that? I want to get your view on, whether Xi Jinping is perhaps losing power. What do you think Hu Jintao's role has been, and how is he connected to Zhang Youxia, who is the other vice chairman of the CMC?
Well, Zhang Youxia stayed above the fray. I mean, he was part of the Shanxi gang, this group of the second big pillar of Xi Jinping's support. But his folks took a bunch of lumps at the hands of the Fujian clique, that other group of supporters. And perhaps they're getting revenge.
So that's Wei Fenghe and Li Shangfu, is that correct?
Right. There's a whole group of those guys that had at the Shanxi gang, and so Zhang Youxia, he seems to have been related to a lot of the people that were writing essays that started saying, we should have more collective decision making. This whole thing about because everyone else for quite a while has been saying that Xi Jinping is like, he's the ultimate voice. Oh, we should all be studying Xi Jinping thought. Really, we need to double down on Xi Jinping. But the country isn't doing that well. They're not, their economy isn't great. There's a massive property bubble. Militarily, they're not ready for most of the things that they want to do, and they've got a lot of pressure from that time. If you look back, there was a golden era right around the Beijing Olympics. And leading up to that, much greater openness, friendliness.
So that was 2008?
Yes, and that whole lead up, 2006 through 2008, you have the period right after that up until about 2012. And what happened at 2012 is Xi Jinping got in power. And immediately he starts pushing all the foreigners out. It became really hard to have any kind of, to run a business, to get work permits for managers, a lot of people. There's a lot of fear. And even the relationship with normal civil authorities started to change a lot for foreign businesses. It's not only that, but if you're looking at is my country doing successfully? Are Are we welcoming investors? Are we attracting like the world's best and brightest to come and contribute? Are our own people who are the best and brightest, do they have a chance to rise? Everyone wants their kid to do well, and people are people. I mean, this is just how it is. So Zhang Youxia managed to stay above the fray. The people aligned with him apparently are writing these things which suggest, well, shouldn't we have a more collective way of making decisions? 20 or 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been at all controversial. But now, just even suggesting, shouldn't we have a few extra eyes on these ideas, becomes like a big deal.
To the single man rule that China is now.
And Zhang has done a great job of trying to look like he supports Xi Jinping, at least up until about a year ago, when at least he started keeping Xi out of his mouth.
Right, and I understand that he apparently chaired a few meetings without Xi Jinping. So Stalin launched his Great Purge in 1936 with the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the military and wider society. It followed a series of political purges since he came to power in 1924. The Great Purge resulted in the arrest, imprisonment and execution of millions, including political rivals, intellectuals and perceived enemies of the state. A prominent feature was the continued and ruthless cleaning out of even those close to Stalin. Many of them were loyalists who helped purge former comrades before being arrested themselves. Professor Chen, so a promotion to a higher-ranking position, therefore, in Stalin's Russia, and it seems in Xi's China, represents a higher risk of being purged the next day. What is Stalin logic, and does this apply very much to Xi?
I think it can be generalized to all of the dictatorship, that the priority of the dictator is to consolidation of power and political survival. And there's no mechanisms of ensuring the power transformation, and also there's no mechanisms of ensuring the internal mechanisms of dealing with this collective decision-making process or the diversity of the discussions. So the best way of the dictator to maintain in power is to make sure that everyone is loyal to himself.
John, so it seems that there is the issue is that there's a legitimacy deficit in these kind of dictatorships, and this is what gives them the paranoia, obviously. So tying into that, for Stalin and Mao, there was a pattern of failed policies followed by purges. Yeah, so we know with Mao, of course, there was the Great Leap Forward, the cultural revolutions, and then all of these purges following the calamities. Can we say the same for Xi Jinping?
I think so. I mean, there's an old joke that if you, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean there aren't people out to get you. And, you know, a lot of the international business community, mainland China was a great place to live for a period of years right before Xi Jinping got into power. It is looked at by a lot of folks as a golden era in which Chinese cities were like great places to live, do business, have your kids in school. There were a lot of great, people being attracted to that. And I think what you see in terms of the failure, the difficulties in the economy, the closing of factories, the movement of capital away from China to other places in Asia, that's on Xi Jinping's watch.
John, can I ask you, in your view, do these purges, and they've been massive, they've been continual, do they actually point to the potential instability, not just of China, but more specifically for the CCP regime?
That's the problem. You see, Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, if anything else, they did their term-limited periods. They were dictator for like a short period of time, and they embraced that, the idea that I have great power, but I will rule with some level of consensus. I will talk to the other factions, and I will turn over the keys when the time comes. And then Xi's not about that. Xi's about himself, and so you get this rare situation. You have Deng Xiaoping, who's all about the people. And then you have Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, who are all about perpetuating a recipe for success that Deng Xiaoping handed them. So they maintained essentially a somewhat autocratic way of trying to lift the country out of poverty and into some level of prosperity, to become sort of a middle-class country. And Xi Jinping is all about himself. It's not about the party. It's not about the country.
Despite the instability or turmoil within the PLA, they still have met certain targets. The rocket force met its targets. Recently there were 2 aircraft carriers that went for the first time simultaneous drills in the West Pacific. Taiwan says these actually are simply to divert Chinese domestic attention away from the purges. In fact, they still raise questions about PLA reliability, cohesiveness, combat readiness. What's your view?
Well, several things. First, China's ambition, the territorial ambition on Taiwan will never fade. So that is first. So Taiwan should go also to strengthen the self-defense capability and also the determinants. That is for sure. And second, after these purges and internal instabilities, the first thing the dictators will do is to strengthen up, to show in muscles. So it's like these 2 aircraft carriers go through the second island chain is to do this. And also we see a routinization of the China's military drills around Taiwan. So they are trying to show that they can still dominate the military, there's no problem. And the successors of after the purge, the new leaders, they will also want to do something to show that they are in control. So I think the dangers, the level of dangers or the crisis here will not decrease at all. So the takeaway is that Taiwan should just speed up of all of the reforms. Yeah.
And also not be distracted by what's happening with all these purges.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much, Song Fangyu and John Eastwood, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.